Chris Eubank Jr. is set to return to the ring after his loss to Conor Benn in the rematch. And I think this could be a huge mistake. Now, before I tell you what I think about this, let's have a look at this article on the DAZN website. And as you can see, it says that Chris Eubank Jr. eyes return to super middleweight after medical absence, which is confirmed by his promoter, Ben Shalom. Now, we go a little bit down here just to get some of the quotes from Ben. As you can see here, right? Ben Shalom said he's had stuff to do medically to try and flash what he's been dealing with. He went on to say once that is done, he will be back, probably at 168 pounds. He then went on to say, but there was an underlying issue that he had to get rid of. I think we all know that, but hopefully looking forward to him being back middle of the year. So he's talking about, summer 2026. Chris Eubank Jr. should be back in the ring. He then went on to say it has been resolved in some sense. Otherwise, you couldn't allow him to get in the ring again. And that's why he's taking the time out. And then he says that there wasn't enough time between the first fight in April and what ended up being November. It was something that required proper medical attention. He then went on to, cap everything off by saying he didn't get that, but now he is. He lives the life and then can come back in a healthy and safe way. Until that's resolved, he won't be getting in the ring. So look, those are the words of Ben Shalom. And guys, look, I'm going to be honest here. I'm going to be, as truthful as I can in my opinion there. Chris Eubank Jr. did not look good. He did not look good in that fight. Not at all. The last time we saw Chris Eubank Jr. after the fight was when we saw this video on Instagram. He looked in serious trouble. He's in the hospital. They're running a whole bunch of, scans, and Chris Eubank Jr. does not look good. So to me, from losing to Conor Benn to then being in the hospital with a whole bunch of medical device strapped to his body doesn't look good. Now, in the fight, I saw that Chris Eubank Jr. was not right in the first round when he started boxing on the back foot, because Chris Eubank Jr., does not box on the back foot. He doesn't. Chris likes to box on the front foot, and he likes to get stuck in. And what we saw there was a fighter that was, feeling the weight of the pressure, absolutely, but also he wasn't right. And, he was lethargic, he was slow, he was plodding. It looked like he didn't have the ideas to be able to be in the ring. So I think that Chris Eubank Jr. potentially coming back in the summer 2026 in the ring, I think this could be a huge mistake. Because guys, let's take it back to the first fight, right? Chris Eubank Jr. had a really good performance. He put everything in that first fight, right? He fought his heart out. His family name was on the line. He didn't want to lose to Conor Benn, and he wanted to honor his father. And that's exactly what he did in the first fight. And of course, the rehydration clause, the stipulation that came with it, that was also part of the whole first fight. So imagine Chris Eubank Jr. having gone through the rehydration clause, strip all these things off of his body, and undergone that rigorous amount of training to be able to have the first fight, which, by the way, I think it took a lot out of him. And then having serious medical issues going into the second fight. And then, overcoming that, he lost that fight. But of course, he came out of the ring alive, right? He came out of the ring somewhat healthy to be able to go to the hospital and get professional help. I don't think that, in my opinion, that Chris Eubank Jr. has got much left in him to be able to fight at the top level at 168. Do you see what I'm saying? Not that he can't get back into the ring. I think he can. And, he lives the life, right? He is a consummate professional. He hasn't always listened to his trainers, and his father has made that clear, right? That Chris does not listen. He doesn't. But one thing you can bank on Chris Eubank Jr. doing is that he lives the life, right? He doesn't go out partying, drinking. He's always in shape, in camp and out of camp. And he gave, so far in his career, he's had entertaining fights. He's avenged his loss against, Liam Smith. he is, he's yet to avenge his loss against Conor Benn. Is that something that we're going to see? I'm not sure that they will make that fight again. But I don't think that the Chris Eubank Jr. that fought 4 or 5 years ago is the same Chris Eubank Jr. in 2026. And that is because, number one, he took a lot of punishment in that, Liam Smith fight. And then he lost to Conor Benn in a fight where he was in a bad way. So I think Chris Eubank Jr. is not the same fighter. And I think him coming back into the ring to face the likes of Canelo, which is a fight that he probably would want. Now, Terence Crawford has retired. The belt will be fragmented, right? And maybe that is what he's thinking. He can get a world title shot with one of the fighters in 168. But there are some really good fighters there. And there's some really sharp fighters who have not been through the condition that Chris Eubank Jr. has been in. So look, if there was a time for someone to sit Chris Eubank Jr. down and probably tell him, look, maybe this is the time to retire, then I think this is probably the time to tell him, right? His father was very adamant that Chris Eubank Jr. should not take the Conor Benn fight. He was super serious during the first fight. And even in the second fight, his father was still banging on the same drum that Chris Eubank Jr., his son, should not take the fight with Conor Benn. So if there was a time to convince Chris Eubank Jr. not to take the fight, not to be in a fight like this where he wasn't himself, where he was really slow, where he wasn't in the head space. If there was a time, then now is the time to advise him, to say, look, maybe there's something else that you can do apart from getting in there, because I don't think that Chris Eubank Jr. is the same fighter he was a few years ago. I don't think, and that's my opinion, I don't think that Chris Eubank Jr. would be able to get, his energy back. I don't think so. Yes, it's 168, and that was where his father was, advocating for him to fight. And I think a lot of people in boxing, if you were arguing for Chris Eubank Jr., you're actually arguing for him to fight at 168 instead of 160. However, I think that is a serious damage that is done with Chris Eubank Jr., which happened in the first fight when he had to undergo all the rehydration clause, where he had to boil himself down. He went through a lot with his body, and the guy, is in his mid-30s. He's not a young person anymore, right? He's not a young fighter anymore. And Father Time is undefeated. And I genuinely think that Chris Eubank Jr. has deteriorated physically, right? Physically, the body is not the same, having gone through what he's gone through with the Conor Benn fight. So him coming back this summer, I'm not sure it's a good idea. I'm not sure it's the right thing to do for Chris Eubank Jr. And as I said, if there's a time for someone to advise him to have a think about, his career and his health, maybe this is the time. Maybe this is where his father has to step in and go, Chris, I think it's time to retire. I think it's time to, hang it up. And, his promoter, coming back and saying things like this. I mean, Ben Shalom is just a promoter, right? He wants to make as much money as he wants. I don't think that Ben Shalom would be advising Chris Eubank Jr. to call it quits, right? He wants to see Chris Eubank, because let's face it, Chris Eubank Jr., if he comes back, he would have a decent fight. Maybe not as Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, but he probably maybe could sell the O2, O2 Arena. So, Ben Shalom is not going to tell him to retire, but I think someone should really have a conversation with Chris Eubank Jr. and tell him, look, maybe it's time to think about your health. With, he's made good money. We saw on his Instagram that he bought a car, I think a Mercedes G-Class, the big one. So look, he's made some good money, and maybe he should think about his health. I think if he comes back to 168, I think any top fighter in 168 could probably get the best out of Chris Eubank Jr. I think they could beat him, because I don't think he's the same fighter he once was, let's say a few years ago. But maybe he thinks that there is a world title shot that he can get now that the belt will be fragmented at 168. So look, get in the comment section and let me know what you think about Chris Eubank Jr. wanting to come back to boxing. Is it right? Has he got the ability? Has he got the physical strength that he needs to fight at the top level, do you think? Let me know what you think about it in the comment section below.